What is the difference between like humans and animals, right? There is no real difference. The truth is, we're just very intelligent animals that have an ability to use symbolic language in order to express our ideas and ourselves creatively to one another through the spoken word. A lot of people will say, well, it's our creativity that separates us from the beasts. It's our ability to create art and music and take part in our creation and dance and participate in that. And, I have to disagree. I see almost all animals as artists. Spiders making beautiful, intricate webs, birds clearing their workspace and creating these beautiful, intricate nests. Throughout the entirety of nature, we see active display and mastery of skill, honing of skill in order to impress the other. And an evolutionist can say, oh, well, that's all just instinct. There's not a lick of creativity there. That spider's just doing it on instinct. There's no original thought. But isn't that what creativity is? Even in human beings? Just instinct? Just primal intuition? Real creation, real artistry comes from a place that is much deeper than the rational and the intelligent mind. It comes from a place that is intuitive, is almost naturally wise and knowing, something deeper and primal, something instinctual. When we think of instinct, we think of it as, oh, it's just the animal's like a little computer following his orders. And that's not what it feels like to live in your instincts. What it feels like to live in your instincts is to live intuitively, to follow your gut, to listen to the wisdom of your feelings and your emotions. I think what was really the turning point where we really, I don't know, fell out of harmony with the rest of nature, and kind of started doing our own thing is when we started to create ideologies and belief systems about how we thought the world should be. And that came through the development of sophisticated language expression. When we developed the ability to speak and express ourselves and share ideas through the spoken word, it became a turning point in our intellectual development as animals. That's when we became really, really smart and we became very sophisticated symbolic thinkers. Now, there is an upside and a downside to this great evolutionary step. The upside to the evolutionary step is we can now exchange information much more rapidly. I don't have to experience things for myself in order to learn. Somebody can teach me about the world, and I can gain expert knowledge and insights into the nature of reality without having to actually engage with reality. So the acquisition of knowledge emerges in human society. We sit around the campfire and we tell each other stories. And for thousands and thousands of years, this becomes a human pastime. Through using language, we pass down stories, we pass down knowledge. And through that ability to keep knowledge and work with information, valuable information, our society begins to evolve and becomes more advanced. Because now we can pass down techniques. Okay, we can teach people how to farm. We can teach people how to utilize certain tools and materials. So that's the upside of language and that evolutionary step. The downside is it also makes us susceptible to believing in lies. Okay, before language, we relied exclusively on our intuition and our instinct. And that was very fine tuned in relation to our environment around us. So it was a very reliable feedback system. We could rely on our intuition back then. We could rely on our primal instincts back then because they were fine tuned to that environment. But with the exponential growth of information sharing in our culture, it was very easy to believe more in ideas than our own internal intuitive compass. And that's when we made the transition from feelers to thinkers. And as soon as we stopped believing in our own feelings, in our own hearts, in our own intuitive selves, and we started to believe in ideas about the world, we became disconnected from reality in a very fundamental way. We kind of disconnected from the collective consciousness of the environment around us because we got trapped in this huge evolutionary psychological echo chamber where we place more value on our ideas as opposed to what we feel to be absolutely true, and thus births philosophy, moral philosophy particularly, and asks big questions. How should we live? What should I believe in? What is real? How should I live my life? These are all the great existential questions that birth all of the philosophies of our society. But what we see here is a seeking into a pool of ideas, a pool of knowledge, a pool of symbolic ideas and people's opinions, through experience, of course, of how we think we should live. So we are constantly seeking meaning in knowledge. I have to figure out what my meaning is. I have to know what my meaning is. It has to present itself in front of me in an organized way that I can understand through a rational way of thinking. And we've evolved this way, our culture, over thousands and thousands of years, since the first writings and the first, ancient Sumeria back then. Who knows how our civilization has risen and fallen over the 200,000 years that we've been around as these thinkers, as these kinds of humanoids. I think what has thrown us out of harmony with the rest of nature is that we believe more in our own thoughts and our own ideas than just by sitting and directly observing the reality around us and learning directly from that. We live in a society that constantly demands some kind of theoretical framework in order for it to explain itself or prove itself. And unfortunately, the truth is, we just don't know everything. Okay, our science is limited. We can't explain every single edge and mystery of the universe. We just can't do it. Our technology isn't advanced enough. We have no idea what we don't know. And because we've become so reliant on correct ideas, it's very easy to mislead us now. We've become very gullible. We've become very easy to manipulate through ideologies and through ideas. That is why we are easily politically swayed. And you will notice very much often that we are swayed by orators, we are swayed by great speakers. We are swayed by politicians who say things to make us feel a certain way and make us perceive a certain way and make us think a certain way. We are manipulated through the use of information. So in order to kind of break that, we need to associate with an aspect of our mind that is not interested in information, that is not interested in the acquisition of knowledge or understanding or rationale or trying to figure it out. That's all the ego mind. That is the intellectual ego trying to figure it out, trying to solve the puzzle so it all makes sense. And it's a fool's errand because it's an insect looking up at the universe trying to figure it out. It's like, come on, bro, be real with yourself. You could never understand, not from this point of view. So give it up. instead of running around in existential circles, going through crisis after crisis, and nihilistic collapse after nihilistic collapse, stop trying to figure it out and just be with it. Just sit with it. Instead of trying to figure out what life is or what you should be doing in life, just turn that part of your brain off, if you could, and just sit and be with life as it is, and just enjoy your day, and just appreciate this moment. Might not be what you want exactly, but it was probably what you wanted once upon a time. Rest in knowing that you don't have to have all the answers. You can't have all the answers. It's impossible. When you give up the chase and you rest in the moment, you will find the treasure that you are seeking. And the treasure that you are seeking is the stillness and the calmness of the moment itself. When the mind gives up its constant thinking, and you are able to sit in silence, maybe for the first time ever, and in that silence, able to perceive reality through a completely different lens. No longer viewing reality through the lens of your ideas or your psychological frame of reference, but now you see reality as it is. And that is the core teaching of Vipassana meditation. That's Vipassana. Is walking through your daily life and seeing reality as it is, and dealing with situations as they are. Going back to trusting that intuitive aspects of yourself, that instinctual aspects of yourself, that primal aspects of yourself, that deep voice of wisdom that comes from the highest self. The key to becoming spiritually enlightened is not to go beyond your knowledge, but to revert back to a more natural, animalistic way of thinking. You know, and when we think of an animalistic way of thinking, it has this connotation of savagery. But when we look at animals and what they're doing the majority of the time, they're just chilling. They're just relaxing, bro. They're just enjoying life, dude. They're just fucking there. And it's meditative in a way, bro. It's meditative. Because that dog doesn't need a cell phone to keep itself busy. You know, it needs very little to keep itself busy, bro. It can easily just exist. And I admire that about animals. I admire that capacity for deep relaxation in animals. Even predator animals like lions, you know, the king of the jungle. You know, we think of these lions, these killers and whatever. They spend 20 to 24 hours a day sleeping and chilling and relaxing. That's what it's like to be an animal, bro. Yeah, and then there's these huge spikes of cortisol and danger and what, but most of the time it's chilled. So it's about taking a step back. It's about recognizing that you're stuck in a psychological echo chamber of your own ideologies, and that is why you cannot find any substantial meaning in life. You cannot find any kind of direct answer because you are searching you're searching for you're searching for a real person in a house full of mirrors that is filled with light bouncing through this house of mirrors, and nobody knows where the light source is coming from. Learn meditation, learn how to moderate your own psychology.